Okay, so let me tell you a story. For 2,000 years, some of the smartest people on Earth calculated pi using a method that was, and I'm being nice here, ridiculously slow. Then, a 23-year-old, stuck at home during a plague, comes up with a single idea that just changes everything.
So how did this happen? I mean, how do you just overthrow 2 millennia of mathematical tradition? Well, it turns out you don't do it by working harder. You do it by thinking completely differently.
All right, first things first, let's get on the same page. What even is pi? The easiest way to picture it is with a pizza. If you take the crust off, that's the circumference, and lay it out flat, it would stretch across about 3.14 pizzas laid side by side. And that ratio, right there, is pi.
Now here's where it gets really interesting, how pi also connects to the area. If you cut that same pizza into a ton of super thin slices and rearrange them, point to point, you get something that looks an awful lot like a rectangle. Its width is just the radius, r, and its length, that's half the crust, so pi r. And since area is just length times width, you get pi r times r, which gives us pi r squared. And what that means is, if you have a circle with a radius of exactly 1, its area is just pi. Hang on to that thought. It's the key to this whole puzzle.
For 2,000 years, the only way to calculate pi was something called the polygon method. And trust me, it was a brute force approach of truly epic proportions.
The logic is actually pretty smart. You basically trap the circle between 2 different shapes. So you draw a hexagon inside the circle. Its perimeter is obviously shorter than the circle's circumference, so that proves pi has to be greater than 3. Then you draw a square around the circle. Its perimeter is longer, so that proves pi has to be less than 4. The real value is squeezed somewhere in between.
And to get more and more accurate, you just add more sides to your polygons. A lot more sides. Archimedes started us off with 96. Centuries later, Francois Viet was up to almost 400,000. This became a huge deal, a point of national pride, really, a way to flex your mathematical muscles. But man, the progress was just agonizingly slow.
And this brings us to the absolute peak of that effort. A mathematician named Ludolph van Ceulen spent 25 years of his life calculating the perimeter of a polygon with that many sides. Over 4 quintillion. It's a number so large it's basically meaningless.
And his reward for 25 years of work in a 4 quintillion-sided shape? 35 decimal places. He was so proud he actually had them engraved on his tombstone. But this was it. This was the absolute limit. Brute force had finally hit a wall.
And that's exactly where the old method died. So enter Isaac Newton. It's 1666, he's only 23, and he's stuck at home, quarantining from the bubonic plague. And, like any of us would do, he started playing around with mathematical patterns just to pass the time.
He looked at these simple expressions, like 1 plus x squared or cubed. When you multiply them all out, the coefficients, the numbers in front of the x's, they form this super famous pattern, Pascal's triangle, where you just add the 2 numbers above to get the one below. This was ancient stuff. And mathematicians had already figured out the general formula for this. It's called the binomial theorem. It lets you find the numbers in any row of Pascal's triangle without having to calculate all the ones before it. So the crucial point here is, none of this was new. Everybody knew this formula.
But nobody had thought to do what Newton did next. He decided to take this perfectly well-behaved, totally understood formula and see what would happen if he broke the rules.
And this quote just perfectly captures his whole mindset. The formula was only supposed to work when the power, that n, was a positive whole number, like 2, 3, or 4. But Newton asked, what if it wasn't?
So he tried it. He plugged in n equals -1, and something totally wild happened. Instead of getting a short, finite answer that stops, the formula just started spitting out terms, and it never stopped. He'd created an infinite series. So why does that happen? Well, in the original formula, one of the things you multiply by eventually becomes n minus n, which is just 0. And that, of course, makes every term after it 0, so the whole thing stops. But if n's the negative number, or a fraction, you never hit that n minus n term. The calculation just never, ever ends.
Okay, so it's a neat mathematical trick, but how on earth does this connect back to calculating pi? This, my friends, is where Newton's genius truly shines.
Newton realized that the equation for a circle can be written just like this. And look at that exponent. It's 1/2. It's a fraction. It
It was the perfect target for his new rule-breaking version of the binomial theorem.
So he laid out this beautiful 4-step attack. First, he used his theorem to turn the circle equation into an infinite series. Second, he used another one of his recent inventions, no big deal, just calculus, to find the area under that curve. And remember what we said, the area of a unit circle is just pi. So by calculating the area, he was actually calculating pi.
And then he added one final clever twist. He realized that if he only calculated the area of a smaller slice of the circle, the numbers in his infinite series would get smaller much, much faster, which meant he needed to calculate far fewer terms to get an incredibly accurate answer.
And just like that, the entire game was changed forever. That 2,000-year-old grind was over, replaced by a method born not from tireless, endless effort, but from a single, brilliant insight. The difference was absolutely staggering. To get the same 35 digits that took Van Ceulen 25 years in a 4-quintillion-sided polygon, Newton's method only required calculating the first 50 terms of his series, a task that would take days, not decades.
I think this metaphor just sums it up perfectly. Newton hadn't just built a better ladder, he'd invented the crane. The old way was obsolete overnight. You simply would not build a skyscraper with a ladder. And after Newton, you just didn't calculate pi with polygons anymore.
So really, the crucial takeaway is this: a new way of thinking, a willingness to push a pattern beyond its accepted limits, was infinitely more powerful than 2 millennia of just grinding it out with brute force calculation.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What monumental challenges are we tackling today with the mathematical equivalent of a ladder, just waiting for someone to come along and invent the crane?